Members of the Presidential Task Force, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen of the press, let me once more welcome you all to the national briefing by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 for Monday, 29 June 2020. When the Presidential Task Force briefed the nation on 1st June 2020, we informed you that Mr. President had approved, amongst others, that we should proceed into the second phase of eased lockdown for a period of 4 weeks to enable the Presidential Task Force to evaluate the developments properly and continue to ensure balance between lives and livelihood. We also cautioned that the gradual relaxation was subject to review should developments warrant it. Within the month under review, the Presidential Task Force continued to monitor developments and consequently admonish Nigerians to change their behavior in view of the fact that the spread of the virus had entered the community phase. It is the considered opinion of the PTF that Nigerians, though aware of the existence of the virus, have generally misunderstood the objectives behind the reasoning of government in gradually relaxing the restrictions. For the purpose of emphasis, the virus is still dangerous and has continued to wreak havoc at home and abroad. The exponential rise in number of cases detected and the fatalities give cause for concern. Statistically, the following numbers should interest us all. Let me give you a picture globally as well as what is available on the African continent and the Nigerian situation as of 27th June 2020. The total number of confirmed cases globally amount to 10,129,054. The same number of confirmed cases on the African continent stand at 375,390,000, and the Nigerian statistics is 24,077. In the same vein, fatalities globally stand at 502,189, while on the African continent is 9,229. And the Nigerian fatalities stand at 558. Similarly, there are also figures for recoveries. But the figure that would interest you is that the recent spike in daily numbers, 125,039 reported in the US on the 26th of June 2020, while the highest figure recorded in Nigeria was 779 on the 27th of June 2020. This gives you the global picture of where we stand in the pandemic as of now. But we also need a statistical comparison between the exact dates in the months of May and June 2020, so that you can have a better understanding of the dangers that the pandemic or COVID-19 portends. Within the same period, on the 28th of May 2020, confirmed cases globally stood at 5.5 million plus. Deaths were 353,000 plus. On the African continent, that figure confirmed cases stood at 89,000 plus, while in Nigeria it stood at 8,915. This was on the 28th of May, 2020. In Nigeria, at that time, we had 259 fatalities. Within a period of 1 month, that's on the 27th of June 2020, look at the figures globally. On that day, the figure globally stood at 10,186,375, with over 500,000 fatalities. On the African continent, it jumped from 89,000 plus to 383,000 plus, with a fatality of over 9,000. Similarly, in Nigeria, on the same day, June 27th, our figure jumped from the figure of 28th May, which was 8,915, to 24,077, with 558 fatalities. This gives you a picture of the manner in which this virus has spread all over the world, on the African continent, and in Nigeria. Another statistics that will help you have a good appreciation of what is confronting us as a nation is the daily reported statistics in Nigeria from 18th to 27th of June 2020. In all of these 10 days, 8 out of the 10 days numbers exceeded 500. Of the 10 days, on each of these days, 8 of each of these days, we had a figure of over 500. That's a deliberate sign and a factual indication that our figures are spiking and are rising. The second thing that will be of note and concern to us is that for every detected case, there is a high possibility that up to 5 have not been submitted to testing and therefore not detected. That presupposes that on a day that you have 500, the likelihood is that you might have missed at least 2,500. I believe if you do a rough mental addition, you will know that the figure we have now might not actually be what is evident in ground or on ground in our communities. As we are all aware, the Presidential Task Force, in conjunction with the subnational entities, the organized private sector, put in place a number of measures. The Presidential Task Force also escalated its activities around risk communication to Nigerians, but we have observed with growing concern the non-compliance with these measures designed to prevent transmission and protect the vulnerable segment of the population. We hold a strong view that if such actions do not abate, experiences of resurgence of the virus from other jurisdictions, including China, the United States of America, Brazil, and across Europe, may emerge in Nigeria, and we run the risk of erasing the gains made in the last 3 months. By way of a reminder, there is presently no known vaccine for the virus, and that all over the world, non-pharmaceutical measures still remain the most effective fighting opportunity we have for overcoming this pandemic. To further strengthen our response, the Presidential Task Force in the intervening period vigorously built partnerships locally and internationally. Similarly, We fully have decentralized the national response, with state governments and communities taking ownership and more responsibility. These efforts have greatly improved our ability to maximally detect, trace, isolate, and treat nationwide successfully. The Presidential Task Force has also continued to pursue the strategic thrust of telling, that's communicate, tracing, identify, treating, that's managing cases, with a stronger focus on precision interventions in the high-burden local governments within identified states of the Federation. This precision intervention will be signposted by 1, aggressive scaling up of efforts to ensure effective community protection and sensitization, and 2, increased provision of support and guidance to states in their response to the outbreak. Ladies and gentlemen, the focus on the important roles to be played by the states is underscored by the following considerations. 1, the spread has entered the community phase, which only states and the local governments should drive. 2, the inaction of a particular state could endanger its neighbors and compromise the entirety of the response. 3, states will be encouraged to make considerable efforts to ensure a push for compliance with the guidelines issued by the Presidential Task Force. And 4, states must also take greater care in leading on public health measures in the local governments under their jurisdictions by working on surveillance, case finding, testing, isolation, tracing, and quarantining contacts. And 5, the federal government will predicate its resource deployment to states on the level of compliance and the extent of collaboration received on this public health emergency. Notwithstanding the challenges faced in the last 1 month and the fact that Nigerians' statistics have been on the rise, substantial progress has been made in the following areas. 1, harnessing of data which shows that 60% of the confirmed cases are in a handful of local governments in the country, 18 out of 774 local governments nationwide, and putting in place targeted interventions. 2, increase capacity to detect, test, and trace those infected with the virus through the activation of 38 molecular testing laboratories, resulting in raising the test count nationwide in excess of 130,000. 3, a shift in focus to a targeted community-based approach, enhanced risk communication. 4, increased collaboration with the legislature, state governments, and the organized private sector. 5, activation of a new cost-effective policy on the evacuation of returning Nigerians. And 6, increase awareness of COVID-19 among the population. 7, cushioning the socio-economic impact of the restrictions through the provision of palliatives to the vulnerable members of our various communities nationwide. And 8, successful reopening sectors of the economy, despite initial challenges in areas such as banking sector, industry, and agriculture. Today, the Presidential Task Force submitted its 5th interim report to Mr. President for his consideration. In the report, the PTF specifically reviewed the issues around the general level of compliance with prescribed measures while taking note of the following. 1, implication of the lack of general compliance with measures. 2, the global and domestic developments, especially in the area of rising statistics. And 3, the continued restriction in the education and transportation sectors, as well as for activities that attract mass gatherings, such as operations of market, places of worship, and entertainment. In doing the foregoing, the PTF considered the need for the continuation of the policy of striking the delicate balance between lives and livelihood, as well as inputs received from different stakeholder groups. The Presidential Task Force similarly identified the underlisted areas of concern that will require attention under the ongoing restrictions. 1, international travels. 2, entertainment activities. 3, education services sector. And lastly, 4, public and private sector offices. You will recall that the Presidential Task Force had in the previous briefings stated that the aim of the phase 2 was to sustain the gains from earlier steps taken for pandemic control and to enable additional sectors of the economy restart activities. Given the challenges and the visible danger ahead occasioned by skepticism and poor public perception, both leading to lack of compliance, it has come to the inevitable conclusion that the extension of the phase 2 of the eased lockdown will be needed to, 1, consolidate the gains in the areas of the economy that have restarted. 2, ensure better compliance with the health-based response. 3, support the states in enforcing guidelines and protocols, as well as strengthening the local governments, build community-level structures for ownership and effective risk communication. And 4, help to better achieve the balance between saving lives and ensuring the well-being and livelihoods of citizens are protected. I am pleased to inform you that Mr. President has carefully considered the 5th interim report of the PTF and has accordingly approved that, with the exception of some modifications to be expatiated upon later, the phase 2 of the eased lockdown be extended with another 4 weeks with effect from Tuesday, June 30th, 2020 through midnight of Monday, 27th July, 2020. Specifically, however, the following measures shall either remain in place or come into effect. 1, maintaining the current phase of the national response for another 4 weeks, in line with modifications to be expatiated upon by the national coordinator. 2, permission of movement across state borders only outside curfew hours with effect from 1st July 2020. 3, enforcement of laws around non-pharmaceutical intervention by states, in particular, the use of face masks in public places. 4, safe reopening of schools to allow students, only students in graduating classes, resume in person for preparation for examinations. 5, safe reopening of domestic aviation services as soon as practicable. 6, publication of revised guidelines around the 3 thematic areas of general movement, industry and labor, and community activities. 7, provision of technical support for states to mobilize additional resources for the response. 8, strengthening partnerships with states, local governments, traditional rulers, community and religious leaders, and civil society to ensure increased public awareness and compliance with preventive guidelines. 9, encourage state governments to empower local government authorities to intensify contact tracing efforts and ensure stronger grassroots mobilization to support the response. 10, encourage states and hospitals, authorities to particularly ensure continuity of other health services to prevent fatalities from other life-threatening conditions during the COVID-19 pandemic. And 11, deepening of collaboration with other groups at state and federal levels to harmonize the country's COVID-19 response in the short, medium, and long terms. The National Coordinator will in due course announce and publish the details of the revised guidelines, while the relevant MDAs, including education, transportation, and aviation, will respectively consult further with stakeholders and issue guidelines for their sectors. The Presidential Task Force will now, after further briefings or explanation by the National Coordinator, will be ready to take your questions. I want to thank you for listening.